On the 14th of January 2026 this year, I posted on X that no one who has received an mRNA jab gave informed consent. Not one of the billions, not one jab, no one ever received true informed consent from their clinicians. This is one of the scandals of the century: mass global coercion, battery, and assault. In hindsight, I would change this post. It's not just mRNA jabs, it's any of the COVID jabs. And not just the COVID jabs, but the childhood schedule vaccines and the pet vaccines. And it's not just one of the scandals of the century. There are other scandals, including the fact that those who denied and refused an experimental genetic shot were ridiculed, victimized, deprived of their rights, lost their jobs, and to this day have never been compensated or apologized to. In response to my tweet, a certain Dr. Neil Stone, who I believe works at the University College London Hospital, replied on X, "Hi, I gave informed consent to get an mRNA COVID jab. I'm very happy with my decision to get it." Now, I'm unable to respond to him directly because he has blocked me on X. I'm not sure why. I did, however, leave an open message saying, "Please come on my show and let's discuss this." And I've also emailed him because I found his profile on the internet and his email address, but he hasn't replied. So what does a lack of informed consent actually mean? For some, it focuses almost entirely on coercion and mandates, and I get that. And while this is extremely important, that framing is incomplete. Informed consent is actually a broad umbrella term, and a lack of informed consent begins long before the coercion even enters the picture. Informed consent is invalid if there is a lack of full and transparent information given to the patient about what is being offered by the clinician, the doctor, the nurse, or whoever is administering the intervention. That includes incomplete or withheld information on ingredients, mechanisms of action, efficacy, safety, risks, and known complications of the medical drug or intervention. Consent cannot be informed if there are no proper studies, inadequate placebo controls, or if long-term safety data is unavailable at the point consent is sought. You cannot meaningfully consent to unknown risks, particularly when uncertainty is downplayed or even concealed. Informed consent also fails when alternatives are not clearly presented. That includes non-pharmaceutical options and, critically, the option to do nothing, with that option being respected without judgment or favour. If only one pathway is framed as acceptable, consent becomes performative rather than genuine. The problem is compounded when people are denied time and space to decide. Artificial urgency, emergency framing, or pressure to decide quickly undermines reflection and strips individuals of agency. There's also the issue of power imbalance. When institutions, regulators, and clinicians present themselves as unquestionable authorities, people often defer rather than decide. The science is settled. I am the science. Does this remind you of anything or anybody? Deference is not consent. Another fundamental failure is the withholding or minimization of uncertainty. Presenting evolving or contested science as settled is deceptive. Therefore, censorship of dissenting viewpoints is wrong. So is silencing doctors and experts who go contrary to the official advice being given. So is failing to disclose conflicts of interest, whether financial, institutional, or career-based. Undeclared conflicts invalidate consent. And language matters. Framing effects. Emotionally loaded messaging and repeated slogans shape behavior without engaging understanding. Safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. Do you remember that? Risk comparisons without context. Lack of stratification by age or health, and one-size-fits-all recommendations further distorts decision-making. Informed consent is also undermined when personal risk assessment is ignored. If individual circumstances are not considered and everybody is lumped together as a mass and a whole, consent then becomes generic and hollow. Information overload can be just as manipulative as information suppression. Dumping large volumes of technical data without explanation creates confusion, not understanding. Endless charts and bar graphs in yellow and red with hazard symbols designed to instill fear are not informed consent. Then there is moral pressure. Appeals to guilt, duty, or protecting others shifts decisions from personal autonomy to social compliance. Doing things for the greater good or to save granny is not informed consent. Ethical consent must be free from moral coercion. Consent does not end at the moment of agreement. If adverse outcomes occur and are denied, dismissed, or unsupported, the consent process was incomplete. Gaslighting patients is not acceptable. True informed consent includes accountability after the fact. Changing definitions mid-process also invalidates consent. Redefining efficacy, safety, immunity, or risk after consent has been given, and even changing the definition of what a vaccine is a breach of trust. Finally, informed consent collapses entirely in environments dominated by propaganda, censorship, behavioral manipulation, and social punishment for dissent. When debate is suppressed and alternative views are stigmatized, compliance replaces consent. Taken together, informed consent is not a signature on a form, it is a process. When information is incomplete, uncertainty is hidden, alternatives are denied, pressure is applied, incentives are offered, risks are minimized, dissent is censored, and power is asymmetrical. Consent is not informed, even if it's technically recorded. This matters because informed consent is not a bureaucratic hurdle. It is the ethical foundation of medicine. And when that foundation is eroded, what replaces it is not care, it is control. The last few years have shown a complete dereliction of duty by the vast majority of doctors. I would argue 99.99%, who have completely disregarded informed consent, a key pillar of medical ethics. It is truly damning of our profession. And they are not alone. Public health officials, regulators, lecturers in ethics, and academic institutions are just some of those who have effectively torn up what it means to abide by moral and ethical principles. It is clear to me that a Marxist ideology has infiltrated academia, science, and medicine. Collectivism and the so-called greater good are placed above the individual. In this framework, autonomy becomes secondary, the individual becomes expendable, and informed consent is treated as an inconvenience rather than a necessity. In such a world, there is no real place for informed consent, only compliance. Folks, what I've outlined is what it means to obtain informed consent and what informed consent means in reality and in practice. I haven't gone into the details of the failings of the medical trials when it came to the COVID vaccines or any other vaccines. I've not talked about the the lack of disclosure regarding ingredients, the DNA contamination, the 40 different methods of cancer-inducing properties of these vaccines. I've not talked about SV40 promoter. I've not talked about the bait and switch in the manufacturing process. I've stayed away from that. Just simply talking about informed consent, I think anybody and everyone can realize that during COVID, there was no informed consent. None of the billions who received the shot gave informed consent. I urge you all to please share this with your friends and families and co-workers so that people understand the severity of what happened in the last few years and continues to happen to this day. And I would ask everyone, if you now question the COVID vaccines, to question all vaccines to protect you and your loved ones. Love, Doc Malik.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com.